What's up YouTube, Capital G here, got some Witchcraft duels for you guys to check out, seeing what this archetype can do with all the support that just got revealed. This first duel is with my good buddy Atlas Rising, once again, an up-and-coming YouTuber who produces awesome content. You guys definitely should go check him out. I will have a link to his channel in the description below. Now, from what I've seen, because I've had a lot of people submit Witchcraft duels to me, people are taking this archetype in so many different directions, and I do like the fact that it's very flexible. You can run Invoked, you can run Secret Village, you can just run a billion different spells. Some people are trying different floodgates, which you guys will see in some of the other duels, but this archetype does kind of flow naturally well with other ones. Like you can run Prophecy and Spellbooks because you really just need like either, you know, powerful spell support or spellcaster support, etc, etc. Atlas decided to go with the Invoked, or at least he has a couple of builds, and this one's actually the Invoked engine. Now the thing about it is, and I talked about this when the cards were first revealed, the fact that these monsters all have different attributes, a la I guess Altergeist, or you know, maybe something like Prank Kids, does leave the option open definitely for the Invoked engine. And from what I've basically seen and this was probably evident when we first saw these cards revealed, basically you want to get to Hane or you want to get to Vere. If you can get them both on the field turn one as quickly as possible, that's kind of what you're looking for. And then from there, you kind of don't really want to use your spells in your first turn. You want to use your monsters, discard the spells, get your boss monsters on field, and then have your spells just add them back to your hand. This card, the Buy Street, is incredibly important. This is the one that gives you protection, and it means that if your opponent does get through your Hane, like if they can play through the disruption, you still have a level of protection for her, so that's pretty good. You saw the Aqua Dolphin there. That's a big oof play because he doesn't obviously have any monsters in his hand. Now I believe that this Vision Hero Trinity, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Vision Hero Trinity does get to attack 3 times, so he actually can kill the Hane there, but it's fine because the archetype has a Monster Reborn with the Sabotage, so it's all good. He's able to simply pop by discarding the spell. This is where the Invoked sign kind of can take over. You can start either using your graveyard or you can use your opponent's graveyard, put out those boss monsters. Also, the fact that like Invocation can be activated from the graveyard is just really good because it just kind of leaves you where you can always cycle through cards, and even if you don't have a whole bunch of spells, the Invoke side still gives you a very powerful play. So his opponent is going to use the Honest Neos, close to being able to push for game there, but not quite. I can see this though. You can see that if he was playing against a more competitive build, having 2 Alistairs, that definitely wouldn't fly. Like a, you know, a more competitive build like Thunder Dragons or, you know, maybe Altergeist, they could probably break this board fairly easily. You really do need to get those boss monsters like on field early, and that is one thing that I've seen this deck struggle with. When you're top decking monsters and you're not top decking spells, this deck feels like it definitely stalls out. Like when you get Vere and you get Hane on field, you need to be drawing spell cards. You cannot afford to be drawing monsters unless those monsters are, you know, hand traps. If those monsters are cards that like stop your opponent, then it's fine, but you really don't want to be drawing other cards for your entry. And this is a different build right here. This is kind of more of a pure focus build. Now this one does actually run a card that I had just made a video about. I believe it's going to be in the opening hand, and that is Summon Limit. And you guys are going to see this deck is like one of the decks you can use Summon Limits in. You see the Secret Village, so his opponent can activate spell cards. I believe they're doing this in the OCG. I will have a full discussion on this archetype and how the OCG players are kind of theory crafting it. No, you know, no pun intended, witchcraft, theory craft, etc, etc. But you know, Summon Limit is going to show its power here because when you have Vere on field and she's a 2800 booty, she can become 3800 because he has a spell in hand. Your opponent can't activate any spells. Monster effects are going to be negated by her, and they only get to summon twice per turn. What exactly are you going to do? This is kind of how I would, like, this is probably more to my liking. Like, I would probably play this deck a little more focused on this. Now, again, I do know that Summon Limit is a card that you have to hit extremely early, and if you hit it turn 0, as he did in this duel, it is going to be able to take over the game. You see here, he has his Witchcraft scroll. Anytime he runs over a monster, he's drawing a card to essentially make it so that he doesn't run out of resources. And this is kind of like what you're looking for. Now, I don't want to say like, oh, this is the board you have to get where you have Secret Village plus something. This is like the nuts board. This is the like 10 out of 10. You're not going to lose this duel board. But in theory, this is what you're going for. Basically, get Vere, get Heine on field. Use those cards every single turn. Constantly pop cards on your opponent's field. And then just be adding the spells back to your hand. Now, I think Pot of Extravagance is basically a staple in this deck. You're not using your extra deck pretty much at all. The archetype has all its levels staggered, so Konami obviously does not want there to be any Xyz summoning in this deck. Maybe Konami will give this archetype like a Link 2. I think that could be a possibility. I think a Link 1 would be kind of fun for the archetype. Maybe something like how Trap Trick Sarah is. By the way, this was awesome. He uses the Witchcraft Draping, balances all 5 cards. Obviously, none of these were live because he doesn't have a Link monster. Balances everything, pick those cards up, and he's just going to push for game. So that was one of those duels where he basically just jumped on his opponent at the beginning of the duel. Obviously that was not the most meta version of Orcus because he was playing a bunch of cards that, are not really used. But even if his opponent did happen to, like if his opponent was playing the full like tier 1 Orcus, he would have gotten obliterated in that duel. Once again, he does open with the copy of Summon Limit, and it's not going to do as much work in this duel as in the last duel, simply because his opponent has the Pancatrop, so he can instantly pop the card and really not have to worry about it. I don't think that he wanted to try, well, I guess it didn't matter if he would have attacked or not. Anyways, he top decks Pot of Indulgence, and his opponent's going to try to summon Delta. He is going to Ash that's a -1, but you're getting a +1 from the pot, so I think it's okay. I think at some point he is just going to eventually get the Delta. Side frames don't really stay dead for long, but it's fine because getting one of your Witchcraft spells negated is not a problem because you just add them back to your hand. Getting one of your like pot cards or one of your core cards, getting those negated is, that's an actual problem. So Pancatrops is used again. Unfortunately, he didn't go after the the back row. He realizes, oh snap, it's not actually destroyed, and then he simply scoops it up. Last couple of duels are against Trains, and Trains is another deck that if you happen to get Summon Limit early in the game, it's basically just going to be a free win because they won't be able to Xyz summon. I do believe Secret Village is just really good in this archetype because these two, like, it's really easy to get the boss monsters on the field, and then like being able to stop your opponent from being able to stop your opponent from using spells. We've already seen that in Altergeist. Like, it's doing super good in the Altergeist archetype, and it can beat decks like not Prophecy. It can beat decks like Sky Strikers from the jump, so like why not use that? You can see right here he gets Haney on board. He's just going to be able to pop the copy of Libe, and at this point it is a little difficult. I mean, he has a urgent schedule, I believe, special schedule, but if he had the other one, the one that summons from the deck, maybe he would have been able to make a little comeback here. He is running the Infinite Ignition cards, which are okay. I think he's going to try to detach off of the Dora during this turn, and Called by the Grave is actually it's a really nice top deck. But he's going to go for Battle Phase, and he detaches the Duracrane that's going to get hit by the Called by the Grave, so it's not going to activate. And then he can simply use the effect of the Vere, gives her 1,000 attack. So that's something that is really, I think, people are going to underestimate, right? When you get your two boss monsters on field, the fact that like Vere can constantly, because Heine is going to be the card you're constantly attacking with, but the fact that this card can easily go to 44 or 3,400 cannot be underestimated. I mean, your opponent's not going to want to attack either monster. I did discuss that about Vere a while back, but you can see at this point, you're just using your kind of lockdown between your two monsters, and this is essentially the win con of the deck. Just keep these two monsters on board, keep pitching spells to the graveyard, and then just keep adding those cards back to your hand or back to the field respectively, and hopefully that's just good enough to outgrind your opponent. If your deck pushes through these two boss monsters, then you're probably going to lose. Now, I don't think that, I don't really think this deck has an answer to evenly match, which is unfortunate because Secret Village, Vere, Hane, that none of those cards are actually going to stop evenly matched. So that's unfortunate. Maybe they'll have to figure out a way to actually play around that. But from what I can tell, this is basically going to be your win condition. It's a little slow, and if you do get hit with Ash Blossom, as you see here, it definitely hurts. We already knew that that was going to be the case, but you know, the deck definitely does have it has a pretty decent grind game. Maybe like a 7 out of 10. You know, well, I guess it can possibly be a 10 out of 10 if you get, like, you know, summon limits and Secret Village, but probably like a 7 to 8 out of 10, somewhere around there. You can see right here, this is going to be a quick one, because he opens up with Hane, he has Secret Village, so there will be no spells used. Then all he has to do is simply flip over Summon Limit. What is his opponent going to do? His opponent can't go into the extra deck, and yeah, this is basically the 30 behind Summon Limit, is just get this bitch on the field early, make it so your opponent can't really summon any more monsters, and essentially you can just wreck them. He gets Vary on board. He should be able to add a couple of spells back to his hand during the end phase, and this is essentially your 10 out of 10 win condition. His opponent realizes, I can't break this, I'm just gonna go ahead and scoop it up. So let's pause for one quick second and check out these Witchcraft builds. All right, so this was the standard build of Witchcraft that was used in those duels. You can see here that it's still pretty easy to get your spell like lineup incredibly high. Alright, so this was the standard build of Witchcraft that was used in those duels. You guys can see from the deck that it's still pretty easy to get your spell count incredibly high, even without running ancillary, I guess, kind of like engines, whether it be Prophecy or Invoked, because you can run things like Pot of Extravagance, Called by the Grave. These are just kind of like just good standard cards in the meta. This deck doesn't use this extra deck at all. Also, being able to use Secret Village gives you some lockdown. You can obviously, you know, lock down decks that use like field spells or decks that use terraforming, because you know they won't be able to use those, so it's good against like Guru Control or Trickstar. I won't even explain why it's good against Sky Striker. It's just basically like wins that matchup. You can also run some other Floodgate cards, Rivalry of Warlords, because all the monsters you're putting on the field are going to be spellcasters. We see this with Altergeist. Summon Limit also good across the board against a lot of the meta decks. Personally, I wouldn't run like Masterpiece. I just think that card's terrible. I would rather run something like another copy of Ash Blossom, or you know, another copy of Rivalry of Warlords. But this is kind of just like what the standard build looks like. I believe in the OCG, players are not using any trap cards at all, so we'll have to see exactly how they compare the TCG builds in the OCG. This was the invoked version, and you see that its spell count is buffered by things like Double Summon and you know, Spellbook of Knowledge. Also, you're going to have Magical Meltdown and Invocations as well. These are all cards that you can pitch if you don't happen to need them. I just kind of feel like, you know, Double Summon I feel like it's just kind of too much of a neg. If you're summoning an Alistair, obviously it's super good, and I get that, but I think that this deck needs to be drawing its own spell cards basically after turn 1. And with the invoked engine, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if you can afford to top deck a double summon when you already have like Vere, or when you already have Hane on the field. At that point, you are getting a spell, and you can obviously pitch it, but you can't just put the card back in your hand. Although with the invoked engine, you do get a bunch of powerful extra deck plays that the normal build is obviously not going to be able to do, because they're not really using their extra deck at all. So I guess to each its own, and let me know what you guys think of Witchcraft so far. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.